Imagine a construction project that fundamentally defies the engineering capabilities of its era.
Mm-hmm.
And we're not talking about the pyramids here, where you had the backing of a whole empire, a huge bureaucracy, thousands of laborers.
Right, a whole state apparatus.
Exactly. We're talking about a project with no electricity, no hydraulic cranes, no real supply chain to speak of, and absolutely zero blueprints.
And the workforce, it's not an army, it's essentially one family.
Just one family.
Yeah.
And the stakes they're absolute. This isn't some monument to a king or a fancy palace.
No, this is a survival vessel.
Yep.
And the specs call for a ship 137 meters long. That's significantly longer than a football field.
Longer than a football field.
Yeah.
And it's designed to withstand a global cataclysm that hasn't even started yet.
A hydrotectonic cataclysm, yeah.
So today on the deep dive,
right,
we are stripping away the nursery rhyme aesthetic.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to strictly analyze the narrative accounts and the specific details around the construction, the logistics, and the engineering of Noah's Ark.
Yeah, we're basically tossing out the picture book version, with the cute giraffe smiling out of a chimney.
Right.
We're doing more of a forensic breakdown. We're looking at the source material through the lens of material science, structural engineering, and frankly, project management.
Mission today is to really get our heads around the how. The logistics are just mind-boggling when you stop and think about it.
They really are.
How do you physically join wood to create a 137-meter keel that doesn't just snap under its own weight?
And how do you ventilate a floating zoo without electric fans?
Exactly. Or waterproof a surface area that massive without modern industrial sealants.
It's ancient project management on the most extreme level you can imagine. We're looking at a scenario where failure wasn't just an option. It meant extinction.
Okay, so let's start with the specifications. The source material doesn't just say, build a big boat.
No, not at all. It gives us very precise metrics to work with.
What are we looking at?
It does. The instruction given to Noah outlines a vessel that's 300 cubits long, 50 cubits wide, and 30 cubits high.
Okay, a cubit. What's a cubit in modern terms?
So a cubit is generally the length from your elbow to the tip of your middle finger, roughly 18 to 20 inches, let's say.
Right.
So if you convert that to modern metrics, you're looking at a structure roughly 137 meters long, 23 meters wide, and about 13 and a half meters high, 3 stories.
137 meters. To put that in perspective for you, that is larger than many early 20th century steel hull destroyers.
And it's built entirely out of organic material, wood.
It's just,
What?
It's colossal.
It is. But the dimensions, they tell us something very specific about the intent of the vessel. The ratio is what really matters here.
The ratio?
Yeah, the length-to-width ratio is about 6:1. And in naval architecture, that is a very significant number. It tells you this wasn't a boat designed for propulsion. It wasn't built to, cut through waves or go anywhere specific.
Right. It wasn't a speedboat. It was a barge.
Exactly. It was a floating warehouse. That 6:1 ratio is optimized entirely for stability in rough water. If you look at modern cargo ships or barges, they often use very similar ratios. It's all about maximizing your carrying capacity and minimizing the rolling motion.
So the design intent right from the very beginning is purely survival and storage. It's not about navigation.
Not at all. So before they even cut the first tree, the design intent is perfectly clear.
Okay, but before you can build a structure of that magnitude, you have to pick a site. And the source material seems to imply a level of site preparation that I think most of us just gloss over. You can't just build this in your backyard.
Absolutely not. You cannot build a structure with this much mass. We're talking thousands and thousands of tons of timber, plus the eventual cargo load on soft topsoil. It's impossible.
Or not? What happens?
Well, if the ground shifts under the weight of the frame during construction, the spine of the ship, the keel, it twists. And if the frame twists, all your joints fail before the water ever even touches it. You need a solid foundation.
The source actually describes Noah testing the soil, doesn't it?
It does. It describes a manual inspection. Walking on the ground, compressing it with his feet, checking the density. It's primitive geotechnical engineering.
Wow.
He had to find a location that was perfectly level and capable of bearing these immense static loads. So he's looking for bedrock or, highly compacted earth where the soil mechanics won't lead to what's called differential settlement.
And once he finds the site, the prep work involves more than just setting up some sawhorses. The text implies clearing deep roots and large stones.
Oh, it's grueling manual labor. And removing those deep roots is essential because as that organic matter decays in the soil, it creates voids, which causes the ground to sink.
Right. So he had to level this massive footprint entirely by hand.
By hand. But there's a very specific environmental variable in the source account that makes this whole construction site a logistical nightmare.
Okay.
The text notes that at this time, it did not rain.
No rain at all.
The account states that rain as we know it, precipitation falling from clouds, it hadn't occurred yet. Instead, the source describes a mist or a steam that rose up from the ground to water the earth.
Which means the ground is perpetually moist.
Exactly. You're dealing with constant high soil saturation. For a construction site, this creates a massive problem. Mud.
Right.
If you're trying to move timbers that weigh several tons, a mud pit is your absolute worst enemy. The heavy loads sink, friction increases exponentially, and just your footing becomes incredibly dangerous.
So did the source offer a solution for this, or do we have to sort of infer the engineering response?
We have to infer it based on the necessity of the task. The speculation from the source material suggests that Noah likely had to engineer some kind of perimeter drainage system.
Like digging trenches.
Digging trenches, to divert that rising groundwater and keep the foundation pad dry enough to work on. It's basically civil engineering before the carpentry can even begin.
Because if he didn't control the water on the ground,
the heavy timbers would just sink into the mud before they could even be joined together. The whole project would be dead in the water, so to speak.
Okay, so let's move to the materials themselves. The source specifies sorrow or cypress wood. Why that specific timber? Why not oak or something like pine?
Well, if we assume the translation refers to cypress or a member of that family, it is an optimal choice for shipbuilding.
Okay, why?
Cypress is naturally rot resistant. It has a very high oil content. It's incredibly durable in water. It's resistant to insects, and it's extremely strong. But there's always a trade-off.
Which is?
It's dense, it's very heavy, and it is notoriously difficult to work with using hand tools.
And we have to remember the tool set here. There are no chainsaws. No hydraulic splitters.
No. We're talking about felling hundreds, perhaps thousands, of massive hardwood trees using only hand axes. The physical toll is it's hard to overstate.
Chop, strike again.
For hours. To bring down a single mature tree, the caloric expenditure for that small workforce would have been absolutely immense.
And then comes the transport. This has to be the logistics bottleneck. You fell a tree that weighs tons, maybe miles away from your construction site. You don't have a flatbed truck. You don't have a paved road.
You don't even have wheels in the modern axled sense for heavy transport over rough terrain.
So how they do it?
The source describes the use of log rollers. It's basically a friction management problem. You place small, round logs under the massive trunk. You tie ropes to the trunk, and you pull.
And as the log rolls forward, it rolls off the back roller.
Right. So a team has to grab that heavy roller from the back, which is now coated in that mud we were just talking about, run it all the way to the front, and wedge it back under the advancing trunk.
Over and over again.
Over and over, for mile after mile. It's incredibly slow, it's dangerous, and it is exhausting. I mean, if you slip in the mud, or if that log shifts just a little bit, you get crushed.
There's also a social component to this whole phase that the source highlights. This wasn't happening in isolation, in some secret valley.
Not at all. The source describes the surrounding population watching all of this. And they aren't cheering, they're mocking.
Because from their perspective, he's building a massive boat where there is no water.
Precisely. They're probably asking, why are you clearing this land? Why are you piling up all this wood? There isn't even a river here.
Yeah.
It paints a picture of Noah not just as a builder, but as a man exercising immense mental fortitude. He had to ignore the social pressure, the ridicule, to focus entirely on the instruction he'd been given.
He does debate them.
No, he didn't stop to explain the hydrodynamics of the coming flood. He just kept building.
So let's get into the actual construction, the structural engineering. The most critical component of a ship this size has to be the keel, right?
Yeah.
The spine.
The keel is the backbone, absolutely. Everything, the ribs, the hull, the decks, it all rests on the keel. If the keel snaps, the ship breaks in half and it sinks.
And the engineering problem here seems pretty obvious. There's no single cypress tree on Earth that is 137 meters long.
Right. You can't just lay down one log and call it a day.
So it's impossible.
Impossible. You had to join multiple massive logs together so they act as one continuous beam. And this requires a very specific type of joinery known as the scarf joint.
Okay, walk us through that. What is a scarf joint and why is it better than just, I don't know, gluing them together?
Well, they didn't have any glue that could hold that kind of tension. A scarf joint involves cutting the ends of the timbers at a long, tapered angle, often with these interlocking steps or zigzags.
Okay.
See, if you just butted the ends together, the connection point is tiny and it's weak. By tapering them over several feet, you drastically increase the surface area where the two pieces of wood touch.
So they physically interlock, like fingers clasping together.
Exactly like that. They interlock, but then you have to secure them. The source implies they were driving hardwood pegs or dowels through that joint to lock it in place. And this converts the stress. Instead of the joint just pulling apart, the friction and the pegs force the wood to compress against itself.
And the source mentioned something brilliant about using wooden pegs instead of metal.
Yes. Here's the brilliant part. As the wood absorbs moisture from the air or the water, both the timber and the pegs swell up.
Which makes the joint tighter.
Precisely. The wetter it gets, the stronger the lock becomes. When it's done correctly, that joint becomes as strong, if not stronger, than the solid wood itself, but it requires incredible precision.
Because if that joint is off by just a fraction of an inch, the keel isn't straight.
And if the keel isn't straight, you can't set the ribs. And speaking of the ribs, the skeleton of the ship, the source describes them having to bend wood to form the hull.
So how do you ensure that shape is symmetrical without, computer-aided design?
You use gravity. The source mentions using simple precision tools and plumb lines.
A stone on a string.
A stone on a string. Gravity gives you a perfect vertical line every single time. By using plumb lines and sighting ropes, Noah could ensure the frame was perfectly square.
Because if one rib is set at the wrong angle,
the whole ship lisks. It loses its balance. With a vessel this high, 3 stories, if it's not perfectly balanced, it could just roll over in high waves.
Okay, so the frame is up, it's massive, but it's still essentially a basket. It's not watertight.
Right.
And the waterproofing method described is pitch.
Yes, resin. This was likely a bitumen or a tar-like substance that they extracted from the earth, but the application process is what really fascinates me. You couldn't just, paint it on coal like a modern varnish.
It had to be hot.
It had to be liquefied. The workers would have to heat this pitch in these huge vats until it was boiling.
Oh, wow.
Then they have to carry this dangerous boiling liquid up scaffolding to the hull and apply it before it cooled and hardened again.
And the instruction was to coat it inside and outside.
Every inch, every crack, every single scarf joint. I mean, think about the surface area of a 3-story, 137-meter vessel.
It's enormous.
Sealing this was a massive, dangerous phase of the construction. If they missed one section, the water pressure at depth could force a leak. And a small leak grows into a catastrophic breach over months at sea.
And the source says that when it cooled, it hardened like stone.
Yeah, essentially encasing the wood in this composite shell.
Let's move inside the ship. The source makes a point that this wasn't just a big open gymnasium. It was zoned. It had internal architecture.
It had to. It's basically a biocontainment facility. You cannot have predators and prey mixing in a panic.
Chaos.
Total chaos. The source describes compartmentalization rooms, cages, stalls. But the most critical engineering aspect of the interior is the ballast, the weight distribution.
The vertical layout. Because if you put all the elephants on the roof, you're going to have a problem.
Exactly. That's just basic naval stability. You want your center of gravity as low as possible.
So the heavy stuff goes on the bottom.
The source suggests the bottom floor was reinforced for the heaviest animals, elephants, rhinos, hippos. By keeping that massive weight at the waterline, or even below it, you anchor the ship. It acts as a counterweight. It prevents the ark from capsizing when it's hit by a rogue wave.
And the upper floors?
Middle floor for medium-sized stock, and the top floor for birds and small animals.
Okay.
But placing the birds and the small creatures at the top wasn't just about weight, though. It was about ventilation.
This is a huge topic. You have thousands of animals inside a sealed wooden box. The heat, the carbon dioxide, the methane.
It is a toxic environment. I mean, animal waste produces ammonia and methane. In a confined space, that's lethal.
So how did they solve that?
The source emphasizes a window or a specific opening that ran along the roofline 1 cubit high.
A continuous vent.
It was likely a continuous vent, and this implies a passive ventilation system that uses the stack effect.
The stack effect. So hot air rises.
hot air and methane rise. By having the ventilation at the very highest point, the heat generated by all the animals' bodies would naturally rise and escape through that roof vent.
And as that hot air leaves, it creates a vacuum.
Exactly. It creates a convective current that pulls fresh, cooler air in from other intakes, probably lower down. So the ship essentially breathes. Without that convective current, the occupants would suffocate or succumb to heat stroke long before the floodwaters reached their peak.
What about the logistics of supplies? I mean, the source mentions stockpiling food. That's not just grabbing a few bags of dog food.
No, that is a logistical nightmare that rivals the construction itself. It's not just food. It's specific dietary requirements. You need hay, grain, seeds, roots, maybe dried meats for the carnivores.
And water.
And water. You have to store fresh water for thousands of creatures for an indefinite period of time.
And you have to keep all that grain dry.
If the grain gets wet, it molds. If it molds, the animals starve. The Ark had to be a masterpiece of inventory management. It had to have designated dry storage zones, maybe elevated off the floor, to ensure the food supply remained viable.
So Noah had to be a quartermaster for a small army.
That's a good way to put it, yeah.
Okay, we have the ship, the supplies, the layout. Now comes the entry. The source specifies there was only one door.
Just one.
Structurally, isn't that a massive... cutting a giant hole in the side of a hole?
It's a huge vulnerability. In engineering terms, a hole like that is a stress concentrator. Forces flow around the hole and they can cause the hull to buckle.
So what do they do?
The source describes heavy reinforcement around this door, thick headers and probably diagonal trusses, to distribute the load around the opening so that the structural integrity remains intact.
And then comes the embarkation itself.
Yeah.
The source is very specific that Noah wasn't out there, wrangling animals with a lasso.
No. And this is where the narrative shifts from the purely mechanical to the behavioral.
Right.
The source describes an instinctual override. The animals were drawn by an invisible force. They arrived in pairs, very orderly.
Which kind of removes the logistical impossibility of one family trying to capture thousands of wild animals.
Exactly. They essentially just checked in. If Noah had to go out and trap them, the timeline would have been completely impossible.
But the most significant detail about the door comes right at the end of the loading process.
The closing of the door, yes.
Tell us about that.
So Noah built the door. He reinforced the frame. He hinged it. But the source explicitly states that God closed it.
What's the implication there?
Well, it implies a finality and a seal that human hands couldn't achieve. From an engineering standpoint, it suggests a watertight seal that's beyond the tolerance of, their carpentry.
And from a narrative standpoint?
It signals the end of the human effort. The preparation phase is officially over. The event is beginning.
And the event itself?
Yeah.
The source clarifies this was not just a thunderstorm.
No. The description is terrifyingly violent. It mentions two distinct sources of water. Yes, rain fell for 40 days, but the fountains of the deep burst open.
That sounds like tectonic activity.
It really does. It implies pressurized subterranean water breaching the Earth's crust. We're talking about water exploding from the ground with enough force to shake the entire Earth.
And what was that like from inside the Ark?
The source describes the sensory experience. It didn't float immediately.
It sat there while the Earth shook.
Can you imagine the sound, the creaking of that massive timber frame, the ground underneath just liquefying into mud, the wood groaning as it took on the strain of buoyancy for the very first time?
That moment of liftoff must have been horrifying.
The lurch as the water finally rose enough to break the suction of the mud and lift thousands of tons of structure. And once they were afloat, they were completely helpless.
No rudder, no sail.
Total lack of control. They were at the mercy of the currents and the waves. I mean, this is a psychological test as much as it is a physical one. You're drifting in total darkness inside this noisy, smelly box with no idea where you're going or if you'll ever land.
And what about daily life on board? The source calls it a grind.
It was not a cruise. It was grueling, repetitive labor, feeding hundreds of animals, hauling water, and the endless task of waste management.
Shoveling manure.
Shoveling manure overboard or into some kind of sump, and the noise would have been deafening. Thousands of animals vocalizing, the storm raging outside, the constant creaking of the wood. It was an assault on the senses.
How long were they adrift for?
The rain lasted for 40 days, but the waters prevailed for 150 days.
5 months.
5 months of just drifting before the water even began to recede.
Eventually, the Ark grounds. The source says it came to rest on the mountains of Ararat. But they don't just throw open the door and run out.
No. And this brings us to the testing phase. Noah acts almost like a scientist here. He needs data about the outside world, but he can't see the ground properly from his vantage point, so he uses bioindicators.
The birds.
The birds. First, he sends out a raven. The source notes the raven just flew back and forth. Now, a raven is a scavenger. It can survive on carrion.
So if there were floating carcasses out there, the raven would be fine.
Exactly. The raven's behavior didn't prove that the land was livable or that vegetation had returned. It just proved there was something to land on, maybe dead things. It wasn't a sufficient data point.
So he switches to the dove.
He switches to the dove. The dove is a clean feeder. It needs seeds, fresh plants. So attempt 1. The dove returns immediately. Conclusion. There's nowhere to land.
Attempt 2.
It returns with an olive leaf. This is a crucial data point. It tells Noah that not only has the water receded, but that vegetation is actively regenerating. Photosynthesis has restarted.
But he still waits.
He waits. He sends the dove out a third time. This time, it does not return. Conclusion. The ecosystem is robust enough to sustain life independently. The bird found a home.
And yet, even after the bird leaves for good, Noah doesn't open the door.
No, and this highlights the discipline of the whole narrative. He didn't exit based on his own deduction alone. He waited for the all-clear instruction, just as he waited for the initial instruction to build.
When they finally do step out, the source describes the exit.
It's an orderly dispersal. The animals leave to repopulate their various habitats, and Noah steps out onto a silent earth. The cities are gone. The civilizations are gone. It's a hard reboot of the entire planet.
And his first act isn't to build a shelter for himself?
No. He builds an altar. The source emphasizes gratitude over his own immediate survival needs. And in response to this act, we get the conclusion of the source material. The promise.
The rainbow.
The rainbow. The visual seal of a contract. The promise that the earth would never again be destroyed by water. It marks the end of the catastrophe and the beginning of the new era.
You know, when we look at this whole thing through the lens of engineering, the scarf joints, the soil compaction, the ventilation physics, it really does change how you view the story.
It does.
It's not presented as magic. It's described as immense, practical, sweating effort meeting a divine mandate.
Absolutely. It balances the miraculous with the mechanical. The source wants you to understand that the wood was heavy, the pitch was hot, and the labor was very, very real.
It raises a really provocative thought for me. The source emphasizes that the door had to be built by human hands, carefully reinforced, engineered to tolerance. But it could only be closed by a divine hand.
That is the core tension, isn't it? It asks this fascinating question about the limit of human preparation. You can engineer the keel, you can test the soil, you can stockpile all the grain. But at what point do you have to stop engineering for survival and simply trust that your design will hold?
Something to think about the next time you're facing a project that just seems impossible. Thanks for listening to The Deep Dive. Keep exploring.
Keep exploring.